Thanks to this movie, now I can't look at any baby pictures of myself wearing a bear outfit without thinking of what it has done with grisly imagery. Just why? What is up, everybody? RandomRandomMan here, back after mostly recovering from being sick for over a week. The morning I uploaded my previous review for Spider-Man Far From Home, I woke up with a pretty inflamed throat. I was freezing, and then eventually I started coughing a lot as the week progressed. But I have, again, mostly recovered from it. I still feel some hazy inflections in my voice, so if you hear any voice cracks or me giving out from it, just know that, yeah, I haven't 100% recovered yet, but I feel a lot better than a week ago. But you're not here to know all of that. You are here because I am bringing you my review for Midsommar. Now, the plot of this folk horror film basically follows a group of friends who travel to Sweden for a festival that occurs every 90 years, only to find themselves within the clutches of a cult. Going into this movie, I was actually looking forward to seeing it, even though, as I have said on many occasions, horror is my least favorite genre of film, though there are obviously horror movies out there that I do enjoy. And this is the sophomore effort from its writer/director, Ari Aster, who previously directed last year's Hereditary, which was a movie that I wasn't head over heels crazy for like a lot of other people were, but I did like. I mean, for a feature film directorial debut, this was certainly above average just on a filmmaking level and what it brought to the table with its performances, themes, all of that. So with Midsommar, this looked like a follow-up effort that would follow in some parallels to Hereditary, but also do something different stylistically and literally being a lot more light in what it is doing with its visuals, and then it's also tackling something horror related that I think is more tangible. Starting out with the cast and their performances, we have Florence Pugh in our lead role of Danny. Now, she is a young woman that has gone through quite a bit in terms of the early moments of the film as it progresses. Without giving anything away, before the title card even appears, she has gone through a particular tragedy that would have a heavy toll on somebody's mental and psychological health. And just like with what Toni Collette did with her performance in Hereditary last year, Florence Pugh gives a similarly tremendous performance here. And I've never seen Pugh act in anything prior to this film, so to me, this is my only point of reference to see how she is as an actress, and I think that this is a breakout turn for her, even though I heard she was great in other stuff like Lady Macbeth and Fighting With My Family from earlier this year, but either way, she gives a pretty fantastic performance. Also great is the rest of the supporting cast, which includes Jack Reynor as Pugh's character's boyfriend, Christian. Now, the chemistry that these two have across the movie, I thought worked, as from the early onset of the film, there is a bit of testiness with their relationship. And when the movie does keep going and we see what all of the Midsommar festivities do to the characters, we see not just Pugh's performance stand out, but also Raynor's as well. He is an actor that I think has significantly grown over the past few years. I first saw him in Transformers Age of Extinction, but then I saw him in other roles like the performance he gave in Sing Street, and I thought he was superb in that. And likewise here in Midsommar, he does as great of a job. Then there's also William Jackson Harper as one of the roommates to Raynor's character Christian, who is specifically writing a thesis on all of the history involved with the Midsommar Festival. I thought he was very good. Wilhelm Blomgren, I apologize if I butchered that name, he plays the Swedish roommate to Christian, who invites everyone in this film that's a major player to his home in Sweden to see all of the Midsommar festivities. I thought he gave a solid performance as well. And then Will Poulter plays the last roommate of Christians, and he provides a lot of the comedy, and he definitely got a lot of laughs out of me and the rest of my audience. Then I've also got to give a shout out to the various Swedish actors across this film, whether they are background characters or do interact directly with our main characters. I think that they all did some pretty standout jobs as well in helping create the atmosphere of what the festival is all about. So with all of that being said, I thought everyone here performance-wise did a strong job, but the biggest shout out definitely goes to Florence Pugh. The writing of this film does set this movie up to be of a particular aura and tone, as, like I said with the intro of this movie, we see Pugh's character Danny go through a tragedy that takes a pretty big effect on her. And this plays out for about the first 15 to 20 minutes or so, again, before the title card even shows up. And then as the rest of the movie does progress, we see her reluctantly go on this midsummer trip with her boyfriend and his roommates. And then the rest of this movie's events do play out to a very slow burning degree. This movie runs at about 2.5 hours, so it does play out with a very meticulous pace. Given Ari Aster's previous film that he also wrote and directed, Hereditary, it deliberately dragged as well with a specific rate. And with Midsommar, I thought that the way it played out for about the first hour, I was certainly never bored, but yeah, I was feeling the running time as it did progress. Not a bad thing, but it does go to show that the way this movie is drawn out, it's meant to elicit a specific response from those watching it. A lot of what has been talked about with this movie goes in the way of its disturbing imagery, which not a lot of it shows up until over an hour after the movie has progressed. I mean, like I said, with the tragedy that Pugh's character Danny goes through in the beginning, that in itself is pretty messed up too. But the stuff in Sweden that accompanies the Midsommar festivities in that setting when we finally get there, it does build to more of its shocking moments that do play out in bursts. I'm not a very easy person to scare or get disturbed by anything in a movie, but I've got to say that one of the more underwhelming elements of the movie that is more trivial is that I expected this film to be a lot more graphic than it was. It is quite stark and quite vile what imagery is shown here in the small bits that we do get to see of it, and then later the movie as it does conclude. But yeah, I gotta say, like, I've seen worse. But this movie will mess up a lot of people that do see it. It's not for the faint of heart, in short. And what this movie does do in terms of its structure as well, it reminded me of what Mother from 2017 did with its first half being really, really slow as well. But then shit doesn't hit the fan until its second half. Compared to Aster's Hereditary, this structure I thought landed more with me because the first half of that movie I loved to adored, but then as it progressed into its second half, I thought it became too much of a tease, plus I saw the ending coming with its supernatural elements and the payment symbol. I knew what it meant before I even walked into this movie, and just all of that. I still really enjoyed Hereditary either way. But Midsommar, I thought that what it did and its setup with this Swedish Midsummer Festival, it was grounded more in reality and it was more tangible than something like Hereditary did with its supernatural elements, because I knew that all that demon shit was not real and it took me out of it. With Midsommar, Aster really knuckled down on his research, it seemed, because a lot of the actions that took place in this film and the overall design of this movie with its sets, it's based on real rituals that occurred in Sweden years and years and years ago. So that's why I felt like it was more tangible to me. Speaking more of Aster's filmmaking, this guy, between this and Hereditary, for these being his first two feature films, wow. the way he helms the film behind the camera, he really knows what he is doing in telling the story that he wants to tell. And then the rest of the technical merits with this film, for it being made on such a small budget, I believe it was about $6 million that this film was made for. He really knows how to make a stunning film with that small of materials. This movie has cinematography that is so lush, and we see this open Swedish field, or like the commune that these characters eventually go to. It's stunning. This is a beautiful looking movie. And then also with the way the costumes looked, a lot of the white robes that the characters wear, there's flowers everywhere, the sun is shining brightly throughout the film, in stark contrast to Hereditary, where that was mostly taking place at night and with a lot of darker hues and colors. This movie does the total opposite, and it directly takes a toll on the characters and how they feel. Will Poulter's character at one point, in talking about some of the comedy of the film, asks, "What time is it?" "It's 9 p.m. and then the sun is still shining bright. And he's like, "That can't be right. The sky is blue." Granted, that scene, the characters were taking hallucinogenic drugs, but still, the movie does mostly take place in the daytime, which I haven't seen that many horror movies do, so I thought that was quite unique. The editing of this film is so seamless as well, between scene transitions and how certain images do pop up here and there to get a response elicited out of us. And I've also got to give a shout out to the original score of this film by Bobby Cleric, with it using instruments that are appropriate and accurate to this area of the world, Sweden. And it also just felt very folky, and it felt like I was watching or listening to a score that was fitting to the setting of the film, and it's just so euphoric, and it got me so allured by it. Similar to the score from Hereditary, done by different composers. I've already mentioned the running time of this film, which does clock in at almost 2.5 hours, and like I said, I was feeling the running time for quite a bit of it, but it didn't really take that much of an effect on me to make me feel like, ugh, this is taking forever, as the movie does go on at a specific rate to really build into something that will later be like, ah. But with that too, I have to say that from the way the movie does play out in certain bits with the writing, that's where I did take issue with the film. The intro of this movie, as I've mentioned so many times by now, it reveals something about Danny that does take a great effect on her as the movie does continue, but it didn't take as much of a prominence as I expected it to take, because one of the themes of this movie is about grief, similar to Hereditary, but then also about monogamous relationships, which I thought had a much bigger prevalence as the movie progressed between the relationship of Danny and her boyfriend Christian. So with the tragedy at the beginning and how it factored into the rest of the movie, I thought it would have a bigger effect, because it's mostly absent from the rest of the film, save for some bits of imagery that do burst onto the screen in the latter half. Then in the way this movie approaches comedy, like I said, Will Poulter's character contributed a lot to it, and this movie is quite funny throughout because of what characters say and do. With Hereditary, by the time that movie ended and during the final act of the film, a lot of my audience was laughing at the movie. Like, not with it, they were laughing at it because of what they felt was ridiculous by that movie's end. But with Midsommar, I thought it was more balanced here, because it was intentional to get laughs out of us in certain moments, because we are in the perspective of these outsiders, these Americans, and even two British people that are a part of the festival as well. This British couple, they are seeing all of this crazy shit happen, and they're like, well, what's going on? How can you guys see this as acceptable? How can you see it as normal? Blah, 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 blah. All of that. I did think that it added to the comedy, but then later, as the movie does veer into some more of its like deep and more gruesome areas. This one scene in particular that involves Rainer's character and a bunch of women. Yeah, my suspension of disbelief was tested a bit there, because my audience was laughing at the movie at that point, and I gotta say, I was laughing too, because I'm like, okay, I can't take that kind of imagery seriously without chuckling a little bit, even though it's meant to be played out to a disturbing degree. But there is that. I still thought that most of the comedy worked. By the movie's end, though, what got me into its positive side, ultimately, for all of what I've said with its technical merits, the writing, the directing, all of that, just the way the ending played out too, I felt that it landed more well on me compared to Hereditary because of what it built up to and what the film did combined with everything that I've said. It ended on some imagery that, yeah, I won't forget. It also reminded me of what A Clockwork Orange did by the end of its narrative. And if you can get me to compare any movie to that film, a movie that I consider one of my top 3 favorite movies of all time, you got my respect, ultimately, and forever. And that's what Ari Aster has done with Midsommar. Compared to Hereditary, I enjoyed Midsommar more than that film, and what Aster has crafted with this movie has definitely made him a force to be reckoned with in the realm of horror. I definitely want to see him do more than just this genre of film, because he is such a talented filmmaker behind the camera that what he could bring to just about any other genre would be so intriguing to see done. But as for Midsommar, this is a film I have no hesitation recommending to any horror fan out there. But to any average audience member going into this film not knowing what to expect, their patience will be tested, and I think it's gonna give them a weak stomach if they are not up for all of the bloody and all around gory imagery that this movie does show within a lot of its second half. So for that, yeah, it's a watch at your own risk kind of situation here. With all of that being said and more, I definitely recommend Midsommar. My final verdict for Midsommar is 4 out of 5 stars. Thank you all, as always, for watching. Be sure to like this video, comment on what you thought of Midsommar. Social media links in the description. Subscribe to my channel for more, and I'll catch you on the next movie review.